I was sitting here been thinking about this for quite some time, and there's a lot of things that people say to justify what they do, and that's cool. That is your right. There's a lot of things people say to make it as if it's a flex, and that's cool. That's your right. But I want to say a few things actually. First and foremost, I want to thank everybody for listening. Peace and praise. Blessed ones. It's always appreciated for y'all to take time with me. Y'all could be anywhere, listen to anything else. So whether it's 5 minutes, whether it's 50 minutes, whether it's 2 hours, y'all show your boy love. I appreciate that. I always appreciate that. So I always have to, give my, my supporters and listeners, their acknowledgement. So the first thing, and please forgive me, I didn't write this down. I had planned to, but it's one of those days, man. Like I've been like in a very creative, very very productive space. I'm in a good mood, but I wanna say this. What your pastor do for all my church goers, for all my truth seekers, believers, followers of Christ. It is like your pastor your pastor sins is not an excuse for you not to go to church if you are going to church, if you have your reservations about going to church. Because again, we have to remember that even with representation, people misrepresent, the underlying bottom line all the time, like police officers or teachers or, people in politics, right? So your pastor sins should not determine, who God is, because a lot of times people align God with the church, with the Bible, as you should. But I'm gonna explain something to you. When I'm gonna be deep with this. This is extreme. When you come across somebody who you may feel is racist, and we always talk about how being racist, homophobic, all these things are ignorant and everything, right? But there's an experience. I'm actually in the process of watching Karen now. Now I understand why people can have reservations about other people. I'm not none of these things. I'm not a phobe or a racist or any of these things. Now, despite the differences between racism and bigotry, it's like if you come across somebody who's racist and they feel like you know all blacks steal or all Mexicans are immigrants and stuff, and it's like like they're speaking from an ignorant point of view. Same thing with pastor. Like if the pastor is stealing money or sleeping with such and such in the church, and he's got a wife, first lady or whatever, you might feel as though like the church is corrupt. The church are hypocrites. Now, you can justify that. That's cool. But I want to also say this. There's also local churches and churches that are a lot smaller that the pastor that might be his only job again, or he might have another job. So the pastor, the minister, or the evangelist, bishop, whatever, there's something that doesn't do that. Now, Same thing with the police. Some people have a connotation that you can't trust the police because if there was any good police, there would be good police that would be speaking out against the ones who are crooked. Now, again, this could be just me being biased. I have relatives that are in law enforcement, but I also have relatives that have been locked up. And even at the same time, for me, hey, I can be somebody who could be locked up because again, we got taxes that we have to pay that's not paid. We got tickets that has to be paid but isn't paid. Now that's all these things are biblical. Pay what you owe. You make a deal, you got to stand on that deal. So there's a lot of things that we do that is not divine. So I want people to be mindful that you can't live vicariously through the pastor. No matter, how the pastor presents themselves. Like I said this again, if you have an issue with a church, just go to a different church. I haven't been to church in a minute. I haven't spoke to my pastor all year, but I've been attending church online and everything. But again, when two or three are gathered together, he is in the presence. So like I said, sometimes we get things twisted with the brick and mortar. This is today's generation, and a lot of people stray away from the church because of what they experienced in the church, and that's fine. They can do what they want to do, but never allow people's actions to affect your relationship with God. That's the underline, the relationship. It's not about the religion, but the relationship. The pastor's there as a spokesman, as a leader, as a representative of the head of the church or the building or God. But we also got to remember we're all God's children. So you can take that with what you will. Now, another thing, being single by choice is not a flex. I'm going to keep it real. Everybody's single by choice. There are some people who may want to be in a relationship and they have their standards. They want what they want. So a lot of times people might not meet those criteria. But the reason why I say being single by choice isn't a flex is because somebody there's always somebody who might want you, and there might be somebody that wants you that you don't want. The thing that I've realized, and again, I don't hear a lot of men say it at all. I know it's something that a lot of women say. So I wanna give women the grace as well because again I could be misspeaking when I say being single by choice is not a flex. I mean I understand there's women who are choosing to be single because they're in their single season, but there's other things that are happening that aren't single in. So, but that's neither here nor there. Again, I'm not here to condemn, nor am I here to regulate. That's not what this episode is about today. It's just certain things that I had noticed and realized, and I'm like, why do people always kind of, I don't know the word, but a lot of people always kind of justify things based on other people, right? Because the whole fact of only God can judge me, nobody's perfect. Um, people having haters, and I'm gonna be honest, all that stuff is BS for real. I don't believe in high value men, high value women. That's just me. I feel like that's just another social media term that people try to, put in an equation. I mean, there can be high class and low class people, or just people who are, not as not that doesn't come up that doesn't reach the standard that you want. But the thing is about is like what is high value? Now, maybe because I'm somebody who don't believe in that, maybe I don't know what it is, but like, high value, everybody has their ratchet their ratchet, toxic trait. Now it's just a matter as far as who brings it out or where you are at that time. Because we're, like I said, people people don't want to be perfect because they know that nobody's perfect. Now, like I said, there's a couple times God's perfect isn't the same as our perfect, but as a person who wants to make good decisions, the right decisions, the most perfect thing that you can do is to walk an upright path. Now, whatever that is for you, like I said, you leave it as it be. So one thing that I've noticed. Sorry about that. I had got a phone call. See, this is the type of stuff that I deal with on a regular basis. But what was I saying? Um, yeah. So high value, single by choice. All these things. It's a lot. There's a lot that's going on. But there was something else that I wanted to address. Again, sometimes my mind be all over the place. So um, we have to we have to stop. We have to stop this for my melanated indigenous people. We have to stop concerning ourselves with other people that are in a that's being treated differently. Because again, we live in a digital world. We live in injustice and unfairness. But we gotta think about it as this way, right? Like I was saying, where we have so much talent, so many gifts that we was blessed with, and we have to we have to walk the upright path. We have to stand up for ourselves, fight for justice and all these things. But sometimes when we kind of interfere, like when we talk about how white people kind of get a pass to do certain things that black people can't do, we like why why is that so important? And I'm asking from a curious place because me, again, I go to certain places, I go to certain establishments, and I mean, like, so I'm not a wild dude. I mean, to each his own. But my thing is, I go to certain establishments that might not be black owned, and I act the same way. And I'm gonna be honest, like, I'm comfortable in my skin. I'm comfortable around everybody. And I know I was having a conversation with my friend about this, where it is important to be around your own people, right? It is important to be that because there are certain things that we might be the only of. Like, so I'm watching Karen. It's a good movie so far, but it's like we we shouldn't have to hide who we are, or you know be ashamed of who we are because of how another culture or another group of people treat us. It's like life is a lot of times like trial and error. We have to do our best to be right, to live a righteous life no matter the circumstances. There's a time and place for everything. There's a time to fight, there's a time to cry, there's a time to, have fun, there's a time to, take care of business. Work is work, play is play. Now, right is wrong, it could be something that's culturally. But morally, just for me, just my view, my life, I know I know certain vocabularies is different in different communities. Like for me, I know I have used the N word, and sometimes it becomes part of my vocabulary where I'll hit the Book of T, Hulk Hogan, we coming for you, nigga, and then you might slip up. See, that's the culture. When you're used to speaking a certain way, you like it's gonna sometimes trickle over. So one thing with me, this is kind of how I do things. I have to be a little bit more mindful. Like when I be watching certain stuff or listening to certain podcasts that has profanity in it, and my son hears it, he'll tell me to cut it off. Now my son don't tell me what to do, but again, the way that he was raised, from what he knows, like okay, you can't be using bad words. Profanity is a bad word. But when you're grown, you can use it however you want to use it. But we also have to remember there's a difference from profanity and just saying damn or hell. People always talk about if it's in the Bible you can say it, but it's like, well, this is how I look at it. If you're using it in a vain way to kind of disrespect or to condemn or to might put somebody down, that's profanity. That's cursing. But if you're using it like as a term of endearment, which we can get a bit another time, like when you use the N word or when you use ass or when you use F or S or all these words, like again, that it just depends. But I always say somebody's always going to be a guinea pig to where you don't know until you know. If you meet somebody new and you call them the N word and they crash out on you, it's like, oh, I didn't mean it in that way. But again, we all have our standards. So it goes back again to the beginning when we talk about, the pastor where he's being unfaithful to his wife. Now, there are some open marriages in the church, whether, God sees it as wrong, but it goes back again. If you're in a if you're married and y'all have an arrangement as far as like y'all can sleep with whoever y'all want to as long as you talk about it, that is your business. And I've been on my spiritual journey where there's a lot of things that I'm still learning and unlearning. Like I'll give you an example. Um, Homosexuality. That's none of my business. I'm not homosexual. I know what the word says. Now, if you're not if if you're gonna sit here and frown upon somebody because they're sleeping with somebody that might not be the opposite sex of them, hey, that's on you. But I always look it back into the word, when it talks about spreading the gospel. Like again, I've read the Bible whole before, but not all at one time. But I'm gonna tell you this: one thing that always stands out is, First Thessalonians 4:11, where it talks about mind our own affairs. That goes back again to I think it's in Matthew when when God told the disciples to preach the word, go across land and preach his word. However, if they refuse it or doesn't receive it, dust your feet off, meaning that don't pressure nobody. We can't concern ourselves with what everybody else does. And it's kind of ironic that I'm saying it because again, people are adults. People get the words, get all the chastisement and stuff every day. I'm sure, but this is just a reminder because some people might not understand it. So it's like if you offend me, I forgive you, but I may be hesitant to want to deal with you again and you got to heal. Like you can't go somewhere that hurt you, especially if you're trying to heal. That's how this even happened to me. Like even when I was married, going through, this journey, just dealing with infidelity and everything. Where, I like me and my ex-wife, we didn't take no break or nothing, and we would like I've had gotten offers and everything all the time, but it's like, hey, it's it is what it is. But we sometimes often complain about things because we can, but we're not doing anything to resolve it. We might see somebody, like, again, we can't tell the first lady that the pastor is being unfaithful, if because again she might know, but it's like you got to do the right thing still. This is why, even like I know I was saying before, like if you see a man abusing a woman, what would be the right thing to do? Because you do you mind your business and that magnitude? Because you see a woman being abused by a man, like I said, you don't really know the dynamic of their relationship. You don't really know what's going on. You always want to protect women. You always want to protect children. Because look, I'm like, people don't protect men. Men are men. They're strong. They're mighty. They're not. They don't need no protection. That's the narrative. That's the community, the society that that men have. Black, white, whatever, fat, skinny, whatever. You're a man. When you get to a certain age in life, you could be 18, 19, 20 years old, and you're a man. God forbid, you need help. But I don't like that. But it's like I have to use my own discretion at my age now. Like I said, I'm 38. I'm gonna be 39 this year. I use my own discretion. So I'm gonna be honest. I have a special ability. I have a special ability, and I ignored it a lot because it's like I'm not sitting here trying to boast or brag or be like, okay, maybe it's not, but always be sure of yourself. Never never really second guess what you're capable of doing. There could be, maybe it could be fear that's holding you back. Maybe it could be confusion that's holding you back. That's not divine. So one thing that I've say, like, I have a special ability where it's like I can sense, like, in my spirit, when something's wrong, when something's off. I feel it in my spirit. Now I know that there's demons who will hear the truth, who may hear like things of God being pressed around, and the your flesh might not want to. Hey, I can't. I don't want to listen, so they might flee. But you know, doing the right thing could be subjective, but we have to remember, you know, I'm still processing a lot of things in my spirit and my mind and my heart, because, like I said, I don't have no problem googling things and researching that. Like, I read the word, I go to the Bible, I go to different versions of the Bible, I go and look and see, okay, what should I do about this situation? Because again, it's like, we can go to our elders, we can go to our fellow believers, our friends, for guidance or for information, and maybe they might not know, or maybe it's like, okay, what are you speaking? Like, are you speaking from a divine place? Because we're in the world, we've experienced the world. There's a lot of things in the world that we have consumed, a lot of things of the world that's been instilled in us that was wrong, a lot of things in the world that has become normal. And me personally, like I said, I always want to be personal again. I don't want to base things off other people. Like, where's my foundation? Where's my stance? Where's my faith in? And my faith is in God. So I have to remember that when I'm making decisions, especially when it involves other people, I have to sit and make those decisions. I have to be wise. I have to be discerned. So I can't jeopardize my life for someone who's not putting their self, uh, in a better position. Like for me, I have a son that's 9, and then even with the other children in my life, I got nieces, nephews, cousins. I got stepchildren, godchildren. So it's like I remember, I remember when when I was involved with my my goddaughter's mother. She's been on the show before. Much love to the Darby family, but I remember when I was involved with her, and we was talking about you know children and marriage and all these things, and even with my ex-wife, her children are like my children, and even the ones after my son, it's like I love them too, but it's like there's certain things where it's like you want to protect the children. The love that you have for children is separate from the love you may have for the parent, but you also got to remember its boundaries. So for me, like I said, when it comes to defending women, there's boundaries there. Like, you know, if you're in a relationship with a man, married, companionship, whatever type of marriage, and you witness. See, the thing is, when you do things in public, it then becomes public. So the right thing to do would be to defend the woman. That would be the right thing to do. Hey, this man just hit this girl. Now you don't know if they rode together, but it's like, hey, you hit this woman. You got if you see it, you witness it, you can get to them. Like, hey, try to de-escalate it. Not to say to fight like hit the dude, but you gotta try to de-escalate it. But here's the thing, that's the right thing. But also the other thing is when you think about the longevity of it, there's been people who had died. There's people who have died defending a woman in her honor due to abusiveness. Now, you can say what you want. They die hero, fine. But the thing is, it's important why it's important to mind your business and to have discernment at least is because you don't know the dynamic of the relationship. And I have a sister, I have a mother, I have two mothers, and have multiple sisters as well. And I also have friends who are women, friends who are single mothers, friends who have children. And the thing is, like, I'm not gonna let no man abuse them but like I said, I know them. But I also know that there are men who feels like they have entitlement, whether because they might feel like they got good deed, whether they feel like they pay the bills, whether they feel like they just have that thing. Like, and don't believe just because a man hits a woman that he won't hit a man, because he must certainly will. But I'm gonna tell you this, and this is coming from a sense of this experience. Before you defend a woman, I might I might get in trouble. But before you defend a woman that's being abused by a man, before you go over there and prevent it, you don't want you want to prevent somebody from being murdered. Yes, if you can stop somebody from being murdered, yes. But when a man smacks a woman or punches a woman, you feel for that woman. It's like, man, that I feel bad. You feel bad for them. You kind of empathize with them. But before you go over there and play hero, I want you to think about your life. Think about all the things that you could possibly lose. And it's not about being afraid. It's not about being a sucker or a coward. You have to be wise. You have to be smart. You have to remember, like, this is life or death over here. Always stand and fight for yours. Always die for yours. But when it's like I'm gonna be honest, I'm not there yet. I haven't gained enough faith that things won't go left yet. I can defend mine. Like I got my sisters, I got my mother, I got my people. But again, you want to be mindful. So aside from that, there's other things that you also have to keep in mind. Even like with disciplining your children, who can discipline your children? How will you discipline your children? And I'm gonna be honest. Your house, your rules, right? So this is where things get tricky at. If you have a child and your child's parent is involved with somebody else and they're at their house. Now, if you go to somebody else's house and your child disrespects them or disrespects their property, what who dis what's the disciplinary action that needs to take place? Now, me, I used to spank my son, and I discipline him. He still get disciplined, but I don't spank him. I haven't spanked my son in a while. But here's the thing: I've had I've had conversations with my ex-wife about this too. Your house, your rules. If a kid does something out of line, you have the right to spank them with conversation. Now, the thing is, if the parent's not there, I think the best thing to do for me is you got to notify the parent. Tell the parent, you know, and then, you know, we'll figure it out. Because we can't just allow kids to just be running rampant doing whatever they want to do. Because again, I always think about I've come to realization as well to like, okay, hypothetical certain scenarios happen, but let's point in the things that has happened. Things that has happened, even for my son, he's been here at my house. He didn't broke a couple things here. He didn't broke some things that belonged to my mother. He didn't broke something his uncle gave him. He didn't lost glasses, broke glasses, and it's like you gotta pay for these things. Now, instead of getting angry and getting the belt or getting the switch and hitting them or abusing them, um, you know, think about it. Think about the decision because the thing is, a lot of times, especially for me, like I used to get spankings like off bat. I mean, I know some parents say you wait until your daddy get home, you wait until so and so get home, you're gonna get it. Now I didn't had that before too, but I used to get spanked with a belt. My mom used to get, as she said, she used to get spanked with extension cords. I'm gonna be honest, that's abuse. Looking back at it now, I said that's abuse. I mean, that's how it was then. I was looking at this reaction with the Jackson American Dream, and Joe Jackson was putting the beats on them boys. Hey, pick your own switch. I'm gonna spank you right here. So, there are certain different dynamics, certain things, when it comes to disciplining children. We have to figure out different ways besides being violent because it is violence. I think if you have to get physically aggressive or even if you're disciplining somebody, you might have to change your approach because sometimes it's emotional. You gotta, it's emotion. There's emotional things that transpire. So I look at that. I think about that, and I'm like, is this the best punishment for this? You lose out on money. You miss opportunities. You might have to do certain stuff, especially when it comes to children. Not everybody's rich. Not everybody is financially in a position to where they can take off work. Not everybody's in a financial position where they can take vacations. Not everybody's in a situation where they can where their children can even work, like can do homeschool. But you live and you learn, and you'll adjust. You'll have to, you know, go get in where you fit in. So there's that. So blessed ones, like again, like I said, these are just a couple things that I wanted to share with you all, and I always appreciate y'all taking time to spend with me. I don't have too much left to say. Like I said, I'm watching Can right now. There's a couple shows that I've been looking at that I want to talk about later. Y'all can follow me on YouTube if y'all on YouTube. Blessed One Up. Same thing as my Instagram and Threads and all those things. So follow me there. But that's pretty much all I have today. I mean, y'all know how I do. Sometimes if I have something, something to get off my chest, I'll just put it on the podcast. Sometimes I might even put it like on you know Threads or Instagram or TikTok or whatever. But this is something that I think a lot of people can kind of get and understand. Like I said, I'm on my spiritual journey. I'm reassessing certain things. I'm meditating on certain things. So I have that. I love I love learning. I'm learning things that I'm actually like in time. Like my birthday's in July, and I've been saying this almost like every year. There's certain things that I don't care much for anymore. There's still a couple struggles that I deal with, but y'all just pray for me. But yeah, that's it. I don't got nothing else. Like I said, I appreciate y'all. Y'all be safe. Y'all stay positive, productive, and prosperous. This is Blair, and I'll see y'all next time. I'm out. One.